welcome to another edition of Soulivity Live. My name is Brian Westley Johnson, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Everyone, we have a great show for you tonight. So I'm just going to dig right in and read some words to you. What do you think about this? Conflict. In today's world, it can feel as though we are being consumed by it. Discord exists in families, friendships, and the workplace. Turn on any news program or read any newspaper, and you become witness to the oppositional forces of governments, agencies, and individuals vying for power. That same news program will tell you about one human taking the life of another, domestic abuse, bullying, and a myriad of other unacceptable forms of aggression. Some form of conflict seems to permeate global society at every level, resulting in distrust and fear that ultimately erupts in an unproductive expression of anger. You know, these important words describe what some of you may be feeling about our world as it deals with its conflict, fear, and pain. It may seem sometimes like there's no end to it. So that's why tonight's show is dedicated to learning how to create more peace in our lives, even in the midst of apparent conflict. And while I would love to take credit for those eloquent words I just read, I can't, because they're the thoughts of our very special guest. His name is Doug Noll, and he's the author of the book, De-Escalate: How to Calm an Angry Person in 90 Seconds or Less. He was originally an attorney, but now he's turned into a peacemaker, dedicating his life to help people solve intractable and highly emotional conflicts. So with that, let's bring Doug to the show.
Are we there?
Brian. Hey, how you doing, Doug?
Good, man. Good to see you.
Oh, good to see you too. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. Don't forget, we love questions. So if you have a question during the show, don't be shy. Just post a question to the live stream here on Facebook, and we'll get to as many of them as we can during the show. So, Doug, this is such an important topic. I mean, I've been dying to get to it for a while now, so I'm glad we're doing it tonight. My first question is, how did we get here? You know, why do we still deal with conflict this way?
Well, that's a complex question that doesn't really have an easy answer. Part of it goes back to the Greeks and the way that we look at emotions and feelings versus rationality. So there's very deep cultural stuff that's going on. Part of it is that in the last 40 or 50 years, we have lost the ability to have civil conversations. I mean, I started to see this when I was an active lawyer back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and even mid-90s. We were starting to see the decline of civility in the legal profession. And now we have seen that spill out into general society where people no longer can listen to each other. They no longer know how to negotiate. They no longer know how to, for example, use a process known as interest-based negotiation, which is a form of negotiation where you don't compromise.
Okay.
It's a point where collaboration and cooperation are perceived as being weak, and being able to have peace is weak. And the only way I can be strong is make sure that I'm beating the crap out of you.
Wow.
And that's kind of where we're at right now. It's become very tribal, and we have lost the skills to be able to listen and talk to each other.
Wow, you know, tribal, isn't that the word? I mean, where, you know, we're in our own little silos. We don't cross communicate to each other anymore. We don't even have the same information pool.
That's right.
Agree on factual information, right?
Right. That's right.
What made you decide to become a peacemaker?
Well, I didn't plan on that. To make a really interesting long story very short, I took up the martial arts in the 1980s, became a secondary black belt.
Okay.
My teacher kicked me out because I was too arrogant and too much of a jerk and a lawyer and secondary black belt. He said, go learn Tai Chi. Well, Tai Chi has two really interesting paradoxes.
Wow.
The first is the softer you are, the stronger you are.
Mm.
Second is the more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are.
Wow.
Soft to be strong, vulnerable to be powerful. Didn't compute at first, but eventually it soaked in until one day I was in the courtroom and the thought came to me, what the heck am I doing in here? And after that trial, I had a long vacation plan where I did a river trip and thought about how many people I'd really served as a trial lawyer and decided that I couldn't do this anymore. I had just not served that many people, even having handled hundreds and hundreds of matters. So when I came back to town, I live in Central California in the I live in the Sierra Nevada, south of Yosemite National Park. I was driving into my office, and I heard a public service announcement for a new master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies being offered at Fresno Pacific University, which is the West Coast Mennonite University.
Wow.
And the Mennonites are one of the three traditional Protestant peace churches. And so that intrigued me. And I went down and talked to them, and they couldn't believe that a hardcore trial lawyer with my reputation really wanted to study. But I did. And I went back to school, and I got my master's degree, and they completely opened my eyes to what I saw was missing in the law. And so I couldn't convince my partners to open up a different kind of problem-solving practice in the firm, and so I did everything I tell my clients not to do. I had no capital, no business plan, no idea what I was going to do, and I gave a week's notice and left $10 million on the table, left my firm, and opened my peacemaking practice on November 1st, 2000.
Wow.
And I just followed my heart, and I've never looked back. I don't make nearly as much money as I used to make as a lawyer, but I help more people in a week than I helped in 22 years as a trial lawyer.
So you found your own peace as you were making peace with and teaching people how to make peace. Wow.
Well, I was really driven to figure out stuff that really works. And a lot of the stuff that I learned both in my academic work, in my master's work, and in reading voraciously and talking to everybody that I could talk to about this, very few people really knew how to deal with anger and deep conflict. Wow. There was a lot of this stuff were throwbacks to the 1950s and 60s, which turned out to be a misguided reading of the work of the humanist psychologist Carl Rogers, and active listening and all that stuff. Yep. It was ineffective. It didn't work. Right. And so I just started to make it my job to read all the neuroscience I could read and try to understand what really was going on upstairs and how our brains process conflict and peace, and then see if I could come up with ideas based on that could be interventions to be used in intense conflicts. And that's what I've done.
Wow. Now, one of those ideas in your book, you talk about the secret revealed.
The secret revealed, right.
What's the secret? What's the secret that was revealed?
The secret that was revealed is that we are 98% emotional and 2% rational. And therefore, when people are really, really angry, do not attempt to argue, do not attempt to persuade, do not attempt to use any kind of rational process with an emotional person. The only thing you can do is ignore their angry words. That's secret number one. Secret number two is guess at their emotions. And secret number three is reflect back their emotions with a very simple use statement. And when it's all counterintuitive, it's very simple to talk about, not so easy to execute until you do it and try it out. But it's the only skill that I found that, one, works every time, and two, is supported by neuroscience, because there's a 2007 study by Matthew Lieberman called Putting Feelings into Words that shows how the brain responds to this process known as affect labeling.
It sounds like the process that you're describing is, when a person is in that emotional, irrational state, to practice a rational process to move back into a rational mind. Is that?
It cannot happen, because when we are emotional, our prefrontal cortex is shut down, the emotional centers of the brain are activated. There is no way that people can process. And in fact, the reason that affect labeling works so well is because we are literally loaning our prefrontal cortex to this angry person, giving them 45 seconds to process the emotions. The emotional centers quiet down almost instantly. The prefrontal cortex comes back online, and now we can problem solve.
Wow.
And that's how it works. We can be emotional or rational. We can't be both.
Right. So that is those processes, that's the affect labeling.
That's
right?
affect labeling, right. Labeling the emotions.
Now, does this work with children too?
Oh my God, it's brilliant with children. In fact, if parents started using this with 2-year-olds, the prison population in this country and around the world would drop by 90% in 20 years. I absolutely guarantee it.
Wow.
Because, and let me explain very quickly why. Again, this is graduate level stuff.
Yeah.
But at 18 months, in a child's brain, the emotional centers are starting to come online. They were born with these things, but now they're starting to mature. The child has to go through a 3 to 4 year period of experiencing every kind of emotion there is in the world in order to build up a database of emotions and affect to be able to understand how to respond to it. What do we do with a 2-year-old? Now, I don't know about you, but when I was 2 years old and I fell over and skinned my knee and started to cry, I was told, shut up, don't be a sissy, be a man. Real men don't cry, suck it up.
Right,
Exactly.
the socialization of men. Yeah.
That's exactly the wrong thing to say to a 2-year-old. And what you have to do with 2-year-olds is help them, teach them how to categorize their emotions by simply saying, oh, you're really angry. You're really frustrated. Oh, you're really happy. Reflect back their emotions so they can learn, their prefrontal cortex can learn how to categorize and build the database from which they can draw on later in life.
Wow.
I've taught this to parents, and they've taken 2-year-olds who are out of control, and within 2 months, no more tantrums, no more arguments, no more fights, no more nothing.
Wow. You know, this reminds me of child development science where, you know, just like children learn how to speak, right? The vocabulary grows as they hear and they integrate and they mimic words, right?
That's right.
What it sounds like is the part that we've been missing is the emotional part.
That's right. And that, again, is a cultural problem that goes all the way back to the Greeks. And
Wow.
you can trace it all the way through Western culture because we give privilege to rationality over emotionality when, in fact, you can't even be rational until you're emotional first. How do you know what to be rational about unless there's something in the environment that's making you pay attention? That's the emotional reaction. Emotions make us pay attention to the environment. Then we can bring in tools to do whatever we need to do. But you can't be rational unless you're emotional first. And neuroscientists today say that even what rationality we have is what's known as bounded rationality. Under some limited circumstances, we can be rational. But most of our decisions are totally emotional. Wow. So why not learn how to manage our emotions? Why not learn about these emotions, learn the biophysiology, learn the psychology, learn what works, and become competent at this?
Wow. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into the steps for affect labeling. There's 3, correct?
Correct.
Okay, let's go. So can you go through them again?
So you got to ignore the words because if you don't ignore the words, you don't have enough bandwidth to do the rest of it. The other thing that happens is that if you don't ignore the words, your ego gets involved. And when people start cussing you out and insulting you, you're going to get triggered and you're going to go crazy. You're either going to get defensive, angry, avoidant, whatever it's going to be. You have to learn how to ignore the words. So that's step number 1. It's just noise. Right. Step number 2 is you have to be willing to guess at what the other person is feeling. And usually that's pretty easy. If somebody's pissed off at you and they're really angry, hey, you're really angry. It's very easy to guess at that. Right. The beauty of it is that if you stop listening to the words and ignore the words, a space opens up in your consciousness that allows another part of your brain, your mirror neurons, to tell you what's going on with the other person, and what they're feeling will come up into your consciousness and you'll automatically know what they're feeling. Then the third step, it's automatic. Our brains are hardwired for this. And then the third thing that happens is we simply reflect back with the you statement, oh, you are really angry. You're really frustrated. And we do that until we see 4 telltales, unconscious, involuntary responses that the speaker can't control. 1, nodding of the head. 2, a verbal response. Yeah, exactly. 3, dropping of the shoulders. 4, a big sigh of relief.
Wow. You know,
no, go ahead.
Go for it.
That person feels so deeply validated in that moment that you've got a friend for life.
You know, you're teaching people empathy.
Absolutely. This is what empathy is. This is the core foundational skill to being a human being, in my opinion. Wow. Core foundational skill.
Now, how, you went through the process. How does this all come together? Can you give us a tangible example of, like,
Sure. Okay. So let's talk about my work as a mediator and a peacemaker. Okay. I'm called to deal with a very intense, value-laden conflict where emotions are very strong.
Right.
All right. the first thing I have to do is get people calmed down. So what I will do is start to de-escalate them. I'll have them tell me their story, what's going on, and as their emotions come out, I will label their emotions, and I will watch them slowly calm down. And I will do that for everybody in the room. Gotcha. Once they've calmed down, then we can start engaging in problem solving. I can say something like, all right, well, what do we need to do here to make things right? Or what do we have to do to solve this problem and prevent it from happening again? And of course, people will get escalated again. And so it's a constant iterative process. De-escalating, then problem solving. De-escalating, then problem solving. And I will do that all day long, all week long, whatever it takes in the engagement until we come to a solution. And that it's a very simple process, but it's very, very elegant how it works. Wow.
Now, let's say you've gone through the process and you've de-escalated. What happens next? In the book, you mentioned like coaching.
Yeah, well, that's right. And so, that's my next book. I think my next book's going to be called, because everyone's asking me, okay, so I've de-escalated, now what? Right?
Hey, great title. That's a good
I know. So there's a whole continuum of things you can do, from doing nothing. Maybe sometimes all you have to do is de-escalate somebody to coaching. There's a whole process of how to give advice without giving advice. You can engage in all different kinds of problem solving stuff. You can mediate, you can do peace circles, you can negotiate. I mean, there's just a whole continuum of things that you can do once you get people de-escalated. But the problem that we make for ourselves is when somebody gets emotional, we immediately try to problem solve before we de-escalate. And when people are highly escalated, they can't problem solve. They just need to be validated.
Right. That makes so much sense, because you're not thinking, like you said.
You're not thinking.
There's no rationality.
Right.
You're just reacting. Fight or flight.
That's right. That's right. And here's the thing, pretty cool, 45 seconds.
Wow.
I can take somebody in utter rage and have them calm down in generally 45 seconds.
Wow.
It's almost instantaneous. And our brains are hardwired for it.
Now,
that's the thing.
Now, all of this comes together in the organization that you've co-founded called Prison of Peace.
Right. This is where we really acid tested this. So I discovered this in 2004. Lieberman study came out in 2007. In 2010, my good friend and colleague Laurel Coffer and I were asked by a woman serving a life sentence without possibility of parole in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, which happened to be here in California, to come in and teach the lifers how to be makers and mediators. And we agreed to do that. And we decided at the outset that before we could ever train them to be mediators, we had to teach them how to listen. And so this was our core foundational skill. And today we are in 11 California prisons and 4 or 5 prisons in Greece, and we're going to be in Connecticut later this year. Wow. And we're getting inquiries from all over the world asking us about what we do. And we take inmates and we teach them all the steps that it takes to become an effective mediator so that they can stop violence, fights, and arguments within their own prison communities. Wow. And this is the very first day they learn how to do this, because they have to have, by the time we get ready to teach them mediation in about a year, they have to have this skill just nailed, because it's a core skill of the mediator.
Wow.
So it's amazing work.
Wow. And you had some news that you were sharing with me before the show about the first person.
Yeah, the way it started was we received a letter from a woman. Laurel received a letter from this woman who was serving a life sentence without possibility of parole in August of 2009. And we just learned late last week, that she's been paroled. She was the first woman to whoever was serving a life sentence without possibility of parole to be, her sentence was commuted by Governor Brown, and now she's got a parole date, and she will be out in probably 150 days.
Wow.
What's really amazing, of the 15 women we started with back in 2010, more than all of them were lifers and long-termers. More than half of them have been released.
Wow. And
Prison of Peace is the reason, because they've learned skills that completely transform and change them.
What were some of the things that the parole board said about?
Well, I really don't know about Susan, but I do know that the parole board here knows about prison of peace, and so when they look through the C file of an inmate, they'll see the chronos saying that prisoner has participated and been trained in prison of peace, and they start asking hard questions because they want to see whether or not the inmate has really learned what we teach. And when the inmate shows a high level of emotional intelligence, more likely than not, the inmate has a pretty good shot at getting out, regardless of sentence.
Now, has prison of peace also translated into other areas in terms of their lives where they could say where they're going to gain a skill while they're there, get an education, all these other.
Of course, many of those that we certify as mediators are qualified to mediate on the outside. But we also see real huge transformations in family relationships. When the inmates start learning how to listen to their family members and reflect back the feelings of their family members, all kinds of cool stuff happens. One woman wrote a letter to her son that she hadn't seen in 16 years. He had never written to her, never called her, never anything. She wrote a different kind of letter to him and got a letter back saying that he was going to come with his girlfriend and visit her for the first time in 16 years.
Wow.
I mean, just amazing. Marriages have been reconciled. We've had inmates mediate divorces between their parents and to get them to reconcile and visit. I mean, it's amazing the stories that we hear.
Wow.
It's really powerful.
And we were talking about this earlier today around how, specifically here in America, we don't, there's this consciousness around prisoners where you've done bad, you're not human, your feelings don't matter.
Right.
This runs in complete conflict to that. I mean, directly, in opposition to that. You have feelings. You do have.
Absolutely. We made the decision going in that we were going to be non-judgmental and non-critical. We don't want to know we know what their sentences are, but we know for the most part, we don't know what they've done. Many of them, of course, have killed people and heinous stuff, and we just don't care. Right. All we do is say, you come to our class, you do what we tell you to do. We're going to teach you some really valuable skills, and you will be able to give back to your prison community something more than what you got. This is turning a life sentence into a life of service. Yeah, that's what we tell them.
That's it, isn't it? I mean, we talked about this before. You created this place of safety,
right?
That's non-judgmental, where people can actually feel heard. They can express pain, even the pain of making these horrible decisions, right?
That's right.
That ended in crimes being committed and then being convicted and that kind of thing, where they move out of what people have labeled them to be.
That's right.
Into who they want to be and express out of that space.
That's right. And since we only work with lifers and long-termers, I mean, many of these people may or may not get out for a long time. And we're really interested in building a cadre of mediators, peacemakers, and trainers in the prisons that we work in, so they can teach these skills to general population, people who will be getting out. And then this thing slowly virally spreads out into the communities as the men and women who are more short-term are trained as peacemakers and mediators and then are released back into their homes and communities. And that's the real power of this.
And you said that you were doing this out of the country too? You were doing this in
Greece? We have a colleague who came and studied with us for two separate 3-month stints. She was a JAMS Foundation Fellow, and she has taken Prison of Peace, translated all of the curriculum into Greek, and has now started Prison of Peace in 4 or 5 prisons in Greece right now.
Wow. And my guess is
same results.
Same results.
Same results. We work in California. We worked in level 4. We work at Corcoran State Prison, where we were training 100 feet from where Charles Manson's cell was before he passed away a couple of months ago. Locked down, people in shackles. I mean, it's a very intense, secure environment. And we work in level 1, level 2 facilities. Men and women, we see no difference. Doesn't matter what the security level is. It doesn't matter what the crime is. We see the same growth and transformation at every security level in every prison that we work in.
Wow. So, kind of wrapping this back to the beginning, this is a process of mainly at a base level. I mean, it's more complex than this, of course. You've got all the education to talk about this. You're teaching people empathy, and you're teaching people to feel it and to express it, right?
Well, exactly. We're really teaching a form of emotional intelligence, but what we learned is that the way to teach emotional intelligence is to get people to focus on the emotions of other people, to read that emotional data field, reflect it back. And as they do that over a period of time, they reprogram their own brains so they become more self-aware of their own emotional state, so they're able to modulate their own behaviors.
Gotcha.
And that's what we see happening.
Now, of course, everyone, go buy the book. The information will be on our website. But Doug, what's something tangible that people can do to start today?
So tomorrow morning, you're going to go to Starbucks, get your cappuccino in the morning. When you come up the line and you're giving your order to the barista, say, hey, you look like you're having a really great day today, or you look really happy, or oh, you look a little tired, or whatever you see in that barista, just reflect back the feeling, not the words. Watch for the reaction. It will blow you away.
Wow.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Soulivity Live with Brian Westley Johnson, featuring special guest Doug Noll. Inspiration 24 hours a day by downloading the Soulivity mobile application, available at Google Play and the App Store.